Praise your name, Jesus. Great things are happening. Philippians chapter 3, verse 13. I'm reading from the Amplified Version this morning. I do not consider, brethren, that I have captured and made it my own yet. But one thing I do, it is my one aspiration, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. I press on toward the goal to win the supreme and heavenly prize to which God in Christ Jesus is calling us upward. How many of you watched the Lions yesterday? They lost. They're out of the playoffs. They have not won an away game and a playoff game in over 50 years. And they still haven't. And I had hope. It's been a long time since we've even won a Super Bowl. But I mean, just think about that. An away game in the playoffs, we have won in over 50 years. That's rough, Rick. That's rough. And I noticed when the pregame conversation was taking place, they tried their hardest to somehow give a positive note concerning the Lions' chances of actually winning. And you could tell they were straining. And finally, at the end, they asked, so what's your predictions? Everybody predicted the Seahawks. Yeah, not me. I was for the Lions. I just set myself up for heartbreak. I think that's why I like Phil Mickelson. I'm just used to heartbreak. Phil will thrill you, and then he'll break your heart every time. But I like him. He's my player. I like him. Now, I say that. I think one of the challenges for the Detroit Lions is to overcome this environment of loss, to overcome the difficulties of their past. Because when, and this is important, when you become overly focused on your past, it will paralyze your present, and it will impede you from fulfilling your future. Now, there's something to be said about learning from your past. I think somebody said that those that don't learn from their past are doomed to repeat it, I think there's something to be said about it, burnt child dreads the fire, learning from your mistakes. But it is becoming overly focused and consumed with your past that will paralyze your present, and it will impede your hopes for any future success. It reminds me a little bit of a passage that I read earlier this week in my Bible reading, and I hope that you're reading the Bible through. We have a program on our webpage. If you're not, you ought to start reading the Bible. It'll bless you, and it will honestly help you more than you probably know. And it's effort. It takes a lot of effort to read, doesn't it? I know it does for me. There's a lot of times I want to delve right into the day's work. I want to delve right into ministry because mine's ministry, so much of it is. And so I want to get right into it. And I have to stop myself and put it on my list of things to do. And she's seen that. Or pray. Pray is one of the things I have to put up there. Pray. Remind yourself to pray. I need to pray. This is your pastor. And, this is my vocation. And I have to remind myself, make sure you pray. And by the way, don't become legalistic in your prayers. Let me just say this. And here's what I mean by that. There are times, you might say, I pray at this time, and then life changes, and that time's no longer available, and you beat yourself up over it. I'm putting this ahead of God. I don't understand. Why not just pray at a different time? You know what I mean? I mean, honestly, we can become so legalistic. We can allow something as wonderful as prayer to beat us up. That's the devil. That's what legalism does. God understands that now it's time for this challenge. You have to work while it's day. For the night cometh when no man can work. There are times that, listen, you might say, this is the time that I pray, and then God puts an opportunity for you to minister right there at that time. He's probably going to want you to minister and go ahead and pray either earlier or later. He just wants to spend time with you. Does that make sense? But the other thing that I have to do is I have to read my Bible, and I'm going through the Amplified Version this year, and I'm reading everything in it. Every comment, everything in it, just because I'm kind of weird that way, and I just would like to do that. So Genesis chapter 40, I was reading this earlier this week, and it's talking about Joseph. Joseph now is older. He is in the court of Pharaoh, and he has had children. This is in chapter 40, Genesis 40, verse 51 and 52. It says, and Joseph called the firstborn Manasseh, making to forget. For God said, he has made me forget all my toil and hardship and all my father's house. Now I want to stop right there. We're going to go to the next one. But I want you to think about Joseph just for a moment. We're not going to go into a long thing about it. Most of you, I think, know the story. But let me just kind of recap a little bit of some of the things that happened. First of all, we already realize that Jacob is favoring one of his children. He's favoring Joseph. You've heard of the coat of many colors. It's in some commentaries they talk about it was really a long, prestigious tunic that they had that he wore, and the colors wasn't near as important as actually the style of garment that it was. I don't know, but I can say that it was an indication of the fact that he was favored. This immediately, because of this, put Joseph in a place where that he was disliked by his brothers. He was envied by his brothers. There was an undercurrent of hostility from his brothers to him. Your actions and behavior and decisions that we make about our kids. I've got 3. Got 2 grandbabies. But the decisions that we make and the actions that we take affect the behavior of our children. That's for free. But it caused Joseph, there was an undercurrent of hostility. His father makes him this coat, and then there comes a point when his brothers are off working in the fields, and Joseph is at home. Why is Joseph at home? Why isn't Joseph working in the fields? Is it because he is privileged? He doesn't have to work. All the other brothers, they've got to work and they've got to get their money. But for Joseph, I guess he just gets to stay at home and they'll just give him money. I don't know. This is all. By the way, this is all just added. This is Tony Adams. You don't have to take any of this, the commentary around it. But I wonder. I think it's odd. He sends his son Joseph to go and to see what's happening with his brothers, and he goes. He can't find them. And somebody says, oh, well, they went to Dothan. And so they went, and they see him coming a long ways off. And they start plotting. Now, why are they so infuriated at this moment at him? We go back in the story, and Joseph has a dream. He has 2 dreams. One of the dreams is there is a stalk of, I believe it was wheat, and it came up, and all the other stalks of wheat bowed down to him. And the same thing happened with the moon and the stars and the sun. And not only are they a little upset about it, but even the Father is, because he said, are you saying that we're all going to be bowing down to you? That you're going to be Lord over all of us, even your mother and me? Joseph, you're acting like a spoiled child. Like you're some kind of favored child. But Jacob couldn't get it out of his mind. And he pondered upon it. Well, if you're already realizing that this is the favored child, and now this favored child is having these dreams, that you are going to be bowing down to the favored child, and that the favored child is going to take the place as the head of the family, that he would be the one that everyone would submit to. They're not the least happy with Joseph. And they said, here comes that dreamer. So they decide that they're going to kill him. And what they do is they take him and they throw him in a pit without any water in it. Now you read a little bit farther in the story and you hear something very sad. All night long, Joseph cried and pleaded with him to let him out of the pit. And they ignored him. They hated him. They absolutely hated him. Reuben, of course, does not want them to kill him. There's some merchants that are coming by, some Midianites, and they're coming by. They said, listen, why should we do this? Let's make some money off of this. They pull him out of the pit, and they sell him to these travelers. These travelers take him to Egypt, and they sell him to Potiphar, who is the chief executioner at the jail. Now, there's a reason why I'm telling you that. I want you to think about this. He's the chief executioner at the jail. He goes there. He's not supposed to be there. And when he is there, everything he does prospers. I mean, he's good at leadership. And the Lord blesses him. Let me say this. God's blessings come upon people. In their work, get the right person in the right place, and God's blessings will be upon it. And he was committed to Potiphar. He was absolutely committed to him. And so here we have Potiphar, and everything's going great. He said, you know what? I'm not going to worry about anything. You run the entire house, everything that's happening in the house, everything. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to worry about the jail. I'm going to worry about the prison. But you worry about everything else in the house. And he did. And everything was great, except one thing. Potiphar's wife liked Joseph. He didn't just like her, he liked her. As my daughter would say, liked. Not just like. If you just like somebody, that's one thing. But when you like somebody, that's something else. She's married. Here's a new concept for most of you. Not for most of you, but maybe for those that are listening. When you're married, you are committed to your spouse. You're not allowed to like somebody else. And if you find yourself liking somebody else, stop. Take control, really. I mean, this is, well, I feel it. What can I do? Stop. Right? Well, anyway, so she, but, and somebody needs to teach her no means no. No is not some code for yes. You women think you're the only ones got a handle on that. We started this no means no. That started with guys. Started with Joseph. Joseph said no. One day he went in, the office was in the house. He goes into the house, nobody else is in the house. He starts doing his work. Here she comes, sashaying across the room. And she's like this. You know, doing all that stuff. He said, now look, he said, I'm going to explain this to you one more time. Your husband's put me in charge of everything. I can have anything I want. There's not one thing that is held back from me except you. I can't do this against him. I can't do this against my God. No means no. But John, she doesn't understand that. She takes hold of him. She grabs his coat. She starts trying to pull it off. I mean, this is a woman who is aggressive. This is an aggressive woman. I don't know where to go with this. I do know where to go with this, but there's a big censor right now on me here. He squirms out of his coat and runs out. A woman scorned. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So she waits. Her husband and the men get home. Look how this Hebrew that you brought into this house has mocked me. He came in and wanted to have sex with me. I told him no. I said no means no. And look how he's abused me. Now, here's an interesting, this is again, we're back to Tony Adams' commentary. Okay? So this, you'll have to figure out if you think you agree with me or not. You don't have to. This is in heaven or hell. And I'm the first to tell you this is my own interpretation of this. I don't think Joseph was the only object of her lustful affection. I don't think this was the first time she had ever lost control. And I think that Potiphar genuinely liked Joseph. But I think he was put into a corner. He wasn't sure if it was true or not. I think he half believed it wasn't. But he certainly wanted this thing out. So he puts him in the prison. What prison? Prison where he works. Because he's the executioner for the prisoner, for that prison. You get me so far? Why do I say that? Because all of a sudden Joseph gets placed in charge of all of the prisoners and everything that's happening in the prison. He's now in charge. Why would you put him in charge? Why is he the main trustee? Why would you do that? I've seen his work. And I think Joseph was fine. Joseph was the one who went and checked on the prisoners. And he sees the baker and he sees the cupbearer. And they're crying around. They're sad, depressed. What's wrong with you? I've had a dream and I can't interpret it. And there's nobody to interpret it. So, well, what is it? Basically, the gist of the dream was in 3 days, the cupbearer was going to be restored to his position. And in 3 days, the baker was going to be hanged. And they weren't even going to take the time to bury him, but the birds were going to eat him while he was hanging. Nasty. And he told him, he said, now I've told you this interpretation, but when you are restored, remember me, because I'm not even supposed to be here. But he forgot. And I believe it said another 3 years passed before he remembered. 2 or 3 years. And he said, oh, I remember my wrong. Because Pharaoh had this dream. And when Pharaoh had this dream, nobody could interpret it. 7 emasculated cows, they were just absolutely so ugly and skin and bones, and they were terrible. And there were 7 fat calves or cows, and the 7 lean cows ate the 7 fat cows, and yet it didn't do anything to them. They were just the same. And the same thing happened with the ears of corn, and Joseph tells him, well, interpretations belong to God, and God is showing you something he's about to do. There's going to be 7 years of plenty, and then there's going to be 7 years of famine, and they're going to eat up all of the produce of the 7 years of plenty. So you need to prepare. And he tells them what he needs to do, and they put Joseph over this, and you can see all that happens. Now here's the thing that I want you to see. It's hard to get over your past. Sometimes you look back on your past. Obviously, this was something that Joseph had to deal with. He said, making to forget. I'm going to call you Manasseh because God is restoring things. He's making me to forget. Making me to forget implies at least an ongoing process. This isn't easy. I think it was something that continually came up. I don't know if you've had that or not, where you're sitting around, things seem to be going okay, and then all of a sudden, all of these things keep flooding in on you. All the memories, all of the discouragement, all of the hurt keeps coming in. And you find yourself gravitating towards that negativity, gravitating towards that hurt, gravitating towards those feelings, and you're so upset about it and so hurt about it because it was so unjust. Joseph was just a boy. He didn't have any control over what his father did or his father loved him. He told his brothers the dream. He told his fathers the dream that God had given to him. I think he was pretty immature at that point. He didn't know who he should tell his dreams to and who he shouldn't tell his dreams to. I think he was excited about this. He didn't really know what it meant, but he kind of had an idea of what this meant. And he was excited that, listen, God's going to elevate me to a place where I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something with my life. I'm going to be great. They hated him for it. Spent the night crying with no compassion, no mercy, no grace whatsoever from his own flesh and blood, his half-brothers, and they didn't care. Sold him, and now he is a slave. He goes into Potiphar's house. I can make a life for myself. I keep enduring. I keep somehow rising above all of this. And then unjustly, I am accused. And unjustly, I am put into prison. And I didn't do anything. I didn't even get a fair trial. In fact, I didn't even get a trial. And just when I do good for this person and I tell them you're going to be restored, I interpreted your dream. They forget me. The people that I do the most for, they're the ones that seem to abandon me. They're the ones that seem to hurt me. And we can focus on that. Now, Paul makes an interesting statement. Paul said, forgetting those things that are behind. I've heard people say it. I'll forgive, but I'll never forget. You can forget. Listen, I forgive you. Her grandmother, Tammy's grandmother, I think it was her grandmother, one of them used to say it. She'd say, what would she say? She'd say, I hate her ways, but I love her soul, or something like that, right? Yeah, what she's really saying is, I hate her guts, but I'm supposed to say I love her soul. Right? It was just kind of a nice religious way of saying it. Somehow we have got to take control. One of the fruit of the Spirit is what? Temperance, right? Temperance is self-control. I mentioned it earlier. You do not have to be dictated to. You do not have to be manipulated by your thinking. What does the Bible say? To take into captivity every thought that exalts itself against God. The Bible talks about if there's anything praiseworthy, if there's anything to be thankful for, if there's anything good, these are the things you should think about. It said, think about these things. But we want to harbor. We want to provide a harbor for our bitterness. The Bible says, be angry, but sin not. Then he goes on and he says, let not the root of bitterness spring up in your heart. What's a root? A root is something that is planted deep within, isn't it? And it's growing within. It becomes a foundational element. There comes a point when you have got to, and let me say this, in fact, well, let me finish that thought. There comes a point when you have got to release your past. You've got to somehow say, you know what, enough. I can't tell you how many times myself, how many times Tammy, we've sat around, we've been so mad at this, we've been so upset about that, we've been so hurt about this, we're so absolutely infuriated. And it finally dawns on us, we're the only ones that this is affecting. Those people have no idea. I am right now frustrated with my marketplace builder. You know why? She has not returned my email yet. I have a legitimate question. I have wrung my hands. I have paced the floor. I have constantly gone to my email. It's not there. I've sent another email. You know who's upset about that? Me. Do you think she is? She hasn't even read it. I mean, what I'm telling you, it sounds silly, but what I'm telling you is that sometimes we can focus so much on the past. It paralyzes our present. And it impedes our progress for the future. Remember Lot's wife. The reason why that she kept looking back, it wasn't just that glance of curiosity. It was the idea that she turned because she longed for the past. She longed for what was there, and she was so focused on what was there, what she was giving up. It's kind of like the children of Israel. Remember that? They're out in the wilderness. God is providing for them, giving them all kinds of manna, giving them the food of angels. Yeah, but I remember when we were in Egypt, I remember all of the food that we had, the leeks and the onions, and all we have here is this manna. And that's it. That's all we have. And because she looked back, because she longed for it, she became a pillar of salt. She lost her life. She became paralyzed in her present. And her future was lost. There's a lady right now that I'm dealing with, working with. And the honest to goodness truth, she is so focused on her past, things that have happened, injustice that she has endured, that quite honestly, her life has fallen apart. And there's no future. I thought, well, she's an older woman. This must be the problem. She's just a few years older than me. Worry. Real quick. He has a second son. Joseph has a second son. And the second he called Ephraim to be fruitful. For he said, God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Paul said, I am pressing forward towards the mark of the high calling of Jesus Christ. I'm pressing forward. There comes a point when you not only have to decide, all right, I am not going to allow myself to focus on this. I am in turn going to turn, and I am going to be led of the Spirit, and I am going to be fruitful where God has planted me. I am going to bloom where I'm planted. And if that is in a dung pile, then that's where I will bloom. And if that is in a situation where everything is great, in a garden of plenty, then that's where I'll bloom. But wherever I am, I'm going to bloom. I'm going to fight through this. I've got a cup. In fact, I put it on my second cup as well. And it's, when faced with a mountain, I will not quit. I will keep on striving until I can climb over, find a pass through, tunnel underneath, or simply stay and turn that mountain into a gold mine with God's help. But I will not quit. There are so many times that because of what's happened in the past, because of what's taken place, we allow that to dictate the terms of our future. And there is a point when you have got to say, you know what? I intend to be fruitful. God has placed me here for a purpose. God has not abandoned me. And I am here. I personally don't like the circumstances. I personally feel like that why I'm here is unjust. I don't like the situation that I'm having to deal with, but I refuse to be beat. After he said, take into captivity every imagination and thought that exalts itself against God. If you continue to read, it says, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God and spiritual to the pulling down of strongholds. Maybe God has trusted to place you where you are, not to afflict you, and not to somehow make you suffer, but like Joseph, to preserve life. Oh, people that have hurt you, like his brothers, they meant to hurt him. They meant to do him harm. But though they meant it for harm, God meant it for good. And that's where you are. So Paul says, just to read it one last time, I do not consider, my brethren, that I have captured or made it my own yet. I haven't come to where I believe I'm supposed to be. I haven't got it all yet, he says, but one thing I do. One thing that I do. He says, it is my one aspiration, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. I'm telling you, we need to do a little straining. We need to determine to have a little grit. Bible says ask, but it's in the present tense. It's a continuation. It's saying ask. It says keep asking. Knock, keep knocking. Seek and keep seeking. And then you'll find. Then it'll be opened. There has to be that persistence and that determination. I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to allow my past to dictate, to paralyze my present and impede any progress I have for my future. Make a determination this year, forgetting those things that are behind. It's not easy because the devil's going to remind you. Every time he reminds you and he says, don't you remember this? Isn't it terrible that they did this? I can't believe. Sometimes I get so frustrated. I don't even want to see those people. I don't even want to deal with that kind of thing. I'm speaking probably from personal experience. You got to rise up and say, you know something? God has bigger and better plans. God's placed me here because all things work together for good to them that love God, them that are called according to His purpose. I'm where I'm supposed to be. God has a bright future for me. And I'm straining for what lies ahead. I am pressing forward. I got to just say one last thing and then start some music. One last thing. Don't ever get in this notion or this idea, it'll just come. It won't. I realize that God can sometimes just intervene in a moment, in a second, boom, it could happen. These pews will be filled when we fill them. God will lead us to the people. God will give us the boldness to speak to those people. God will give us favor with men to actually get them to actually listen to us and be willing to actually come and try out the church and be a part of the church. But He's going to use you. It won't just happen. Pressing forward, pressing forward, pressing forward into the future, into your destiny. God has a destiny for you. God has a destiny for you. Don't allow your past to paralyze your present and impede you from the future that God has destined for you to have.